Afternoon. This is budget hearing number one, or workshop number one, excuse me, to discuss proposed 2026 budget. All funds today except the water and sewer funds. And with that, I'll turn it over to City Manager Fonda Cronus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much appreciated. Council, in front of you, I put together a guide form. We will go through the budget page by page, department by department. But what I will do is point out some of the lines that had some significant changes or something significant to talk about. Obviously, at any point in time, stop me, ask the department heads for questions, and ask about any budget line that you want to. But these will be the ones that at least will provide some context for some decisions, significant changes that we may have made, and it may help guide the conversation. Or I suppose it might not, but I figured it was a good way to start that. So I figured we would start on page one for general fund revenues. And on the guideline form, obviously we talk about the property tax levy, and it was basically flat. The original goal was to cut the levy by $117,000, but I was not necessarily able to do that based on our contractual obligations. But we are, as we talked about on Tuesday night, able to provide a tax rate reduction. The next budget line I'd like to talk about is sales tax, 1110. Current 2025 budget is $2.95 million. The recommended budget suggests $2.8 million. I think we've talked ad nauseum about why the number is down. As you can see, we're using a current services number in the 2026 budget of $2.7 million. With a couple of two at least new retail businesses that we know are opening in 2026, we figure we can bump that 2.7 number up to $2.8 million. Still down from current year. Next line, 1560, code enforcement fees. Thanks to the leadership of the fire chief, code enforcement revenues in 2025 are up. We feel that that will continue to happen, and so we reflect that in this budget. Line 2001, parks and rec charges, down by $10,000 from this year to next. Given the current trend, just trying to be more realistic with numbers. 2004 is pool concession. You can see 2025's number is 10,000. That reflects the donation from the St. Lawrence Federal Credit Union. The same organization will sponsor the splash pad next year for $5,000. I've already confirmed that, so we changed the number there. 2005, our arena fees up $10,000. With the school ring closed, we're going to be renting more ice, so we feel that a boost there in revenues is appropriate. Marina fees 2006 are down by $6,500 in this year's recommended budget. It's more in line with current trends. Outside water users 2143, down by around $10,000 compared to this year's budget. With the lower tax rate, that's how we calculate these. Lower the tax rate, the lower the revenue number here. The next two lines are I think very important to discuss and point out. 2260 is airport security. In this current year's budget, we have $306,000. The recommended budget is $49,600 below that. We charge the airport, or the Virgin Port Authority, for airport security based on two things. Number one is the cost of 2 police officers. In addition to that, they are required to pay all of the overtime that gets generated when we put folks out there to do security on the airport. With better staffing, the OT at the airport should be reduced. So it's a pass along savings to the OBPA, but there's also a savings in the overtime lines. And the 3120, which is the police budget line. So there's reduced revenue here, but there should be some revenue offsets on the appropriation side there. 3261 is the SRO line. That is the revenue line from the school district to the city for providing school resource officers. The school came to me at the beginning of the budget process and said they're not able to meet the contractual obligation this year. And so we lowered it. Generally speaking, that $270,000 number that's in this year's budget would pay for 3 SROs. The $190,000 in the recommended budget will pay for 2 SROs. We will provide 3 SROs. We're able to do it operationally. In my opinion, it's the right thing to do. And I will share with council that last year when we had staffing issues and we weren't always able to put 3 SROs out there, the school district worked with us and didn't claw back any funds. So in a way, this is a thank you and kind of a, we will pay the favor and do the right thing. This is a 3-year contract that's up June of next year. And so we'll reevaluate and right-size the contract based on their ability to pay and our ability to provide services. It's a lot to sink in, so I'll take a moment. Any questions thus far?
Is there a reason for the trend in the Parks and Rec reduction? We saw that in the Marina reduction. Was there a trend there that we overestimated past budget?
I would say that I overestimated the Marina fees last year in the 20. We raised rates, but we didn't fill every one of our spots, and so as I understand better, and maybe Shane can share more if necessary. There are some marina spots that just aren't big enough to put a boat in there, so we generally leave it for transients or just leave it for extra space. So that was my learning curve on that a little bit.
It isn't because people have been unhappy with the Marina then, because I know we hear a lot about the weeds and things like that. So it's not anything due to that. It's more just that the spots are too small and the estimated revenue.
Yeah, I think we were hoping that the additional fees would, the increase in rates would generate additional fees, and they did not, as it turns out. Shane, you haven't heard anything negative, have you?
Makes sense.
All right, moving on. 2401 is interest and earnings. We probably were a little short in the budget for 2025 on that, given interest rates. We know interest rates are coming down, but they're not coming down that fast. So this incorporates what we think is a pretty fair number for interest and earnings for next year. 2411, rental of real property tax. That's the rental of antennas on our towers. We baked in a Verizon tower, which is a new contract to us in 2025. They've been behind on getting that up and running, so we backed it right out for this year. I think there'll be something coming, but I just don't know when they're going to be operational. So it's not a lot of money. It's only $20,000 anyway, and then you prorate it. So, maybe it's 10,000, maybe it's 5,000 when it's all said and done. But, it isn't going to be enough for us to bake it into the revenues, in my opinion. Fines and forfeitures, 2610. That number is reduced based on trend in history, as you can see there. 2683 is self-insurance recoveries. We feel comfortable in going higher on that because we know of at least 2 workers' comp cases, and we get 2/3 of that salary back as we pay it. So we feel that's a relatively accurate number. 2735 is opioid revenues. That number is down based on information that's been passed to us from the county. The county acts as the pass-through for those dollars from the state. So we received a letter that says that's our number. So we feel good about that number. 2801 is interfund revenues. These are the dollars that come from the water and the sewer fund to repay the general fund for services that they may provide. That number is up from last year, basically as repayment for the Vector truck. So if you'll recall, last year we purchased a Vector truck. We purchased it out of CHIPS funds, but obviously CHIPS funds are general fund revenues, and that Vector truck is split between the 3 different funds. So those funds are repaying back the general fund. Appropriated fund balance is line 2812. Currently in this year's budget, $450,000. So we are planning on reducing the appropriated fund balance number by $200,000, which gets us just a little bit closer to structural balance in that regard. 2813 is encumbered fund balance. What that line is fund balance that has already been set aside and then allocated to the budget in a future time period. In this case, the $325,000 represents the local share of the Green Resiliency Grant. Council has already identified fund balance for those funds. So what we do is we recognize the revenues here in the budget, and then there's an appropriation line. I think it's the last line in the budget, 9901.905, that takes those funds and slides them over to the capital projects fund, which is where that would go. So it's more procedural, but it's incredibly transparent in showing where the money is coming from and where it goes. Line 3001, state revenue sharing. This is an accounting maneuver. You can see this year's budget, the $1.9 million was the all-in AIM funding. That was the traditional AIM funding plus the temporary combined. That's where we put it last year. In the state's budget, we received the temporary funding for AIM again. But what the New York State Controller wants us to do is put it into the next line, which is 3089. So basically backed out the $198,000 from 3001 and put it in 3089. No net change there. I just wanted to explain what we did. And then the last line there is Stone Garden revenue 4104, an increase of $10,000, which matches the overtime line for Stone Garden in the police budget.
Questions or comments?
What is Stone Garden?
Sure. I'll have the chief talk to you about that.
Sure.
He's well versed in that.
For Operation Stone Garden, it is a FEMA grant administered through the U.S. Border Patrol. Actually, it was started in our area through our previous chief, Andrew Kennedy, back in 2008, but it is now administered locally through St. Lawrence County through the Sheriff's Office, and we're a sub-recipient. The intention of it is border security. We receive money for equipment, overtime. We have received vehicles, our beautiful 25-foot Boston Whaler boat that we have. It's been nothing but good for us as what's extra boots on the ground, essentially. Sure. Okay.
Just a couple of observations. I think through NICOM, but through on our own as well, need to work with our legislative representatives with regards to continuance of the temporary aid funding. There seems to be some concern at this point, looking ahead to next year in a state, a year where the state budget may be tight, that might be looked at as a possible elimination. This is temporary in nature. NICOM has been lobbying to make that part of the formula and lock it in to the AIM funding that the cities and municipalities have been getting for years. And if you remember, up until the temporary AIM funding was adopted, I think 2 years ago, that traditional AIM funding had been the same number for at least 15 years, maybe 17. So just something we'll need to be aware about when we get into our lobbying efforts with regards to that revenue. And then just a comment that I'm going to wait till we go through the entire discussion of the general fund budget proposal. But I do have some thoughts about the property tax levy I'll share with council when we're finished that discussion.
It's more of an opinion than anything on that. As far as outside water users, businesses coming in along Kansas Street side, town of Oscogatchee, being an outside user, are we looking at potentially any additional water use? I know probably municipal would kind of offset maybe that 1,000.
I haven't heard of anything specific and actionable enough to put in the budget. Certainly if something were to come through, we'll call it a bonus for 2026. We'll bake it into 2027. It'll help us then.
So you have
But nobody's approached me for any additional outside water users. Oh, yeah. So the new auto parts store on the other side of 37, didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were done. My apologies. It's not going to happen.
Oh, it's not.
No, I just found out not too long ago, when his franchise found out O'Reilly was opening up, they pulled the franchise from him, said too many auto parts stores. Yes, sorry about that.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, Fonda, please continue.
All right, we'll start on page 4 on the appropriations, and the first department is 1010, the mayor and city council. 2 lines to identify as what I would consider somewhat significant increases. One is travel. I failed to increase the travel in 2025. I did not make that mistake again in 2026, so we moved it from $1,500 to $4,000. Also, office equipment is up $1,000 compared to this year's budget based on trend in history.
Where are we traveling to? Well, it's more active participation in NICON conferences and events. So I'm attending at least 2 of those each year. I think Council Stevenson went to the legislative meeting at NICON last February. So there's opportunities for council to attend those type of events if you have time and interest. Yep.
And just as a note, as I travel, I've tried to many times they overlap with my New York State Realtor meetings. So if I can go, it just costs us the cost of registration, and I'm there, and I can just go a day earlier and do that. And there's no overnight stay in the city, it's just the registration. And that extra.
Okay, next department, we'll go to page 5, is 1230 city manager. The only thing I will say here is, given our fiscal condition in this department, I have trimmed as much as I could out of those lines and going bare bones, hoping that those dollars either goes to property tax reduction or to other operations. As our fiscal condition changes, those numbers would probably come back up in future years. But I certainly will take the hit in my department to make sure that there are other things that are able to be funded. All right, next department is the controller, 1315. The controller is here. If you have any questions, I would point out appropriation line 415, computer expenses down $4,000 due to some hard-headed negotiations with Tyler Technologies by the controller. Professional training line 510 is up 2,000. We have a finance director relatively new, making sure that we have some appropriations in case we want to send her to some trainings. Consultant line is 515, an increase of $50,000. If you look at the trend line, we tend to spend significantly more on actuals as we do on budgets, and the $175,000 is more likely to happen than some of the other numbers that we have. So it looks like an increase, but in the end, we generally pay that anyway. So I just figured to me, budgets should be as realistic as possible, line by line. And so this, to me, makes it more in line with history. And then the audit is up $2,000. That's line 522. Now that we're receiving some federal money, we have to do what's called a single audit. We're required to do it, so we might as well budget for it.
So I have a question on computer expenses or training, whatever. We've been having some cybersecurity issues and some IT problems. I believe we've sent out one of the weekly updates about upgrading that. Is that included or taken into consideration?
Not for this. This line specifically, and Angela, you correct me if I'm wrong here, this is specifically the maintenance contract line for our financial management software.
So anything we have to upgrade or improve somewhere else?
Correct. That'll be in 1670. That's central services. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Not too distant future. This just is basically, there are some services that we haven't been using, and so Angela made sure we weren't paying. All right, the next department is the assessment department. Our assessor, Lachelle Dilcox, is here. I will point out salary line 110 includes $7,000 as an enhancement to hire part-time data collectors in the summertime. A few years back, the city spent $275,000 on a company called GAR to do a full city revaluation. In the past, prior to that, I believe the city has taken different neighborhoods and reassessed them. One neighborhood 1 year, another neighborhood another year. I haven't been super impressed with the results on GAR, and so our plan moving forward, and we'll talk about this more as time goes on, is to do the revals more in-house, led by the assessor. So while she's doing her tentative role, final role, we'll have these data collectors out there going through the different neighborhoods, updating pictures, checking the roll card to make sure what's on there is correct. And that will help her do reassessments on a parcel by parcel basis. And so we baked in $7,000 for those part-time data collectors. Line 440 is equipment maintenance, down by 1,000. That's based on the trend in the history. The 2,500 was a little heavy there. Two more lines on the next page. Professional training, an increase of about $2,400. We have a new assessor. She has required coursework, and so we've tried to account for that best we can in the budget. And then line 515, consultants, down by $8,000. Now that we have a full-time assessor, we are going to eliminate a county contract where the county was doing some data entry services for us. We feel we can handle those in-house and able to eliminate a contract, save a few dollars.
Michelle, I want to thank you for the fine job you did so far. So shot in the air. Thank you both.
Any questions or comments for Michelle?
Good work.
Yes, appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Painless, huh? I told you it would be. Next department is 1364, expenses on tax properties. There's only one appropriation line, that's 498. And we take the budget line from 15,000 this year to zero. The city no longer has foreclosure power, so there's no reason to appropriate any dollars there. The next department is the city clerk department, 1410, and I don't have any notes. The lines are pretty sparse and certainly the same as for the most part as 2025, but Kathy is here if you had any questions to ask her about any of those lines.
Kathy, you're doing a fine job. I'd just like to say thank you for all you do there for the city.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I just want to add,
All right, moving on. The next department is 1420, the law department. You can see first line there, 515 or consultants. That's basically charges for our attorneys. Current budget is $225,000. We're going to move that number down to $150,000, which is a significant reduction. Part of what we're doing is we've created a new line, as you can see underneath there, 516, which would cover our expenses for the opioid case. And so we appropriated $10,000 in that line as well. So the net decrease is really only $65,000. And although I always worry about this line because it can be up, it can be down, you never really know when you're going to get sued or what matters. The trend in the 2 years I have been is that we don't use all of the appropriations in these lines. And if we're not using them on a trend basis, then we probably should be raising property taxes to cover them. We have a contingency account. It has $98,000 in it, plus some one-time dollars that we'll talk about in a little bit. So if something crazy were to happen, I feel comfortable lowering this number to this point. But obviously it's council's purview as to whether they're comfortable with that number or not. All right, next.
Any objections? I mean, I think it's a sound budget.
You said 98,000?
In contingency, I'll talk about the breakdown of that, but yeah. Well, it's $153,000. I'll talk about the breakdown in about 5 minutes. All right, the next department is 1440 engineering. Just one budget line to talk about there, 515, the consultant line. We're dropping that line $5,000 from this year to next year. Some of the spending that would normally be coded to this has been coded to planning. So we feel that we're still covering the costs that come in, but they've been coded to planning. So there's no reason to appropriate that full amount anymore. Okay, next department, if there are no questions, is 1490. That's DPW administration. The DPW director, Shane Brown, is here for your questions. And I'll actually group 1490, DPW admin, and 1620 city hall buildings together. The budget lines are almost identical year over year, last year or the 2025 to 2026. So I didn't have anything significant to point out, but certainly if you have any questions on any specific lines, Shane is here to answer your questions. Here, no questions. So if we can move on, the next department is central services, 1670. And this is where our IT stuff comes in, Councilor Silly. So you'll see a number of lines here. I identified 3 of them. 420, which is office expenses, 440, which is equipment maintenance. That's the big line. And then 498, which is other contractual expenses. All of those down significantly, all based on the fact that we are migrating away from an in-house technology, which I think is a bit outdated, to a cloud-based storage system. We no longer need servers, which have high maintenance costs to them. Our firewalls, I think, are overpriced. In fact, I know they are overpriced. And so, we will, and they're outdated as well. So we're going to replace the firewalls this year, and the maintenance costs, we have 7 firewalls, by the way. Instead of $44,000 a year in maintenance costs, I guess the cost will go down to around $7,000 or $8,000. Once you go to a cloud-based system, you need less IT consultant support, if I can put it that way. And so we feel that these reductions here, both in the office expenses, the equipment maintenance, and certainly other contractuals can go down to this number. I will also point out that part of this IT conversion means that we're going to take our email from the current hosting system. I think it's like a POP server or something like that. I don't know. It's well beyond my expertise. And we're gonna migrate to Microsoft 365, and that expense will be in a telephone line later on. Or actually, I think it is. It's in here. I didn't call it out because the number didn't change. We were going to do the conversion this year anyway. So that's in the same 1670 department, 425 telephone, you can see there. Normally our current service spend is $50,000 in that line, and $15,000 more will more than cover that. And by going with that cloud-based email, that helps us eliminate the servers. Significant savings by doing this.
How quick?
Yeah.
I don't have an exact timeline yet, because as we go through it, sometimes we discover some things. I like to think that by the end of the month, the email will be up and running, but certainly by the middle of November, I feel very confident in giving that. I think we can under promise and over deliver on that. The most important thing is to make sure that our systems are secure. So the first thing we need to do is get away from Windows 10 and into Windows 11, and that's happening now. We have identified some equipment that needs to be upgraded, so we're working on that. That's as important as anything else. And if the email and some of the other things lag a little bit based on safety, we're doing that. But we think by the end of the year, everything will be converted over. And in my mind, maybe not everyone else's mind, but in my mind, certainly by the middle of November, we should be on 365. Well, we'll see if I can hit that benchmark, but it's not me doing the work, so there's much more confidence involved in that. Any other questions on the IT stuff? I will keep council abreast as to when we hit some of the benchmarks that we're going with on this. Next department to discuss is general insurance. That's Department 1910. A $7,800 increase here. There's two things going on. So we have this budget line in all three of the operating funds. And at the mayor's request, and I think it was a solid idea, what we've tried to do is allocate the total policy cost based on asset allocation. So what do we do, Angela? We do 25, 25, 50?
No, I mean, currently.
Oh, correct.
Yeah, currently,
We're one third, one third, one third.
one third, one third, one third.
Okay.
So the funds with the most assets pay the most on it. We just kind of prorate it in that way. What's working against us though is a projected 15% policy increase on top of, I think, 12 last year.
Are we looking at different providers? We do that on a routine basis. I know at the rescue squad, we were looking at a 20% increase. We actually secured it through a different provider for less than last year.
So we did ask our broker to do that. They're looking into NYMER right now. So we're hoping to get a quote from NYMER. And so NYMER is the insurance reciprocal for New York. And sometimes municipalities do well with that. So I think that everything is done, right? Paperwork to get quotes is done, and we were just waiting on information. Yeah, so we're hoping to eat away at some of that 15% increase, but we've planned for it. And if it comes in lower, then, you know, that's a good thing. Okay, next department, property loss, 1931, one budget line there, 498. A $5,000 increase based on what I call outstanding losses that we need to account for. And Angela can probably give you better details than I can on that one.
So from time to time, in the various accounts where we're owed money, they become uncollectible. So in the normal financial statement process, we have an allowance for this, but there are times that that needs to be adjusted or we need to do a direct write-off versus an allowance. And so the trend in there, you know, you'll see in the 2024 budget, we did a significant evaluation of some of our outstanding receivables that actually related back to the taxes and the change of how we collect them. So there was a huge write down in 24 that was actual. And with that cleaned up and out of the way, we have a provision in here for 10,000. So it's minor in the grand scheme of how much we have in receivables. And we already have an allowance on the record that is in it's 250 or 350. I'm not sure what it is, but it reflects the amount of money we do not expect to collect within the city.
Stay up for the next one too.
Okay.
Any questions on that? I know it's a little bit.
When you say uncollectible, that would be like someone not paying the property taxes.
Barring property taxes, because we are made whole on that, it would be somebody runs into a stop sign and we send them a property damage bill
Oh,
and they never pay that. I mean, that's a
I
realistic
got
thing.
you.
Yep.
Okay, next department is 1950, property acquired for taxes. There's only one budget line there, 799, an increase of about $4,200. There are situations where once the city owns a property, under certain circumstances after, I think it's 3 years, the city must begin to make the other taxing jurisdictions whole on that property. And so we have an increase in that. Did I catch that?
You did. Jeff.
Every now and again. You know?
So we are paying the taxes that we pay our county and school taxes on city-owned property.
So we're still paying the county?
We're considered a taxpayer of the county on the property that the city owns. So not all of it gets a full exemption. So as we get to hold it for 3 years, and then once that 3 years is up, there's certain parcels that become taxable.
I thought they were making us whole.
This is
They are making us whole when our taxpayers do not pay us the property taxes. We're the taxpayer in this situation. We own the property.
Oh, gotcha, sorry.
Could you give us an example?
We have we have a whole list, but some vacant land perhaps that we aren't really using for city business that we own. And we've met the 3-year exemption on that. This one is exempt, but a good example of city-owned property is the Diamond property. So we just kind of, that one is exempt for a much different reason, but, you know, eventually, should we just kind of put that into our inventory? That would be taxable. Thank you. You're welcome.
So we have a list of parcels, and at some point in time, in the very near future, we'll approach council with those addresses and seek to perhaps sell some of those, and maybe that'll reduce this number in the future, potentially.
Correct.
All right, if there are no questions on that, we'll go to Department 1990 contingency as promised. Significant drop here. We baked in a number of potential expenses in 2025 for contingency, including contractual obligations for the 2 CSEA contracts we negotiated. The number that's in the budget this year is $168,633. That's generally made up of the following. We started with a fund in the general fund, a contingency of $100,000. And as we worked through the budget, we determined a few things. Number one is somebody's health insurance. We're not sure if they're going to go from a buyout to a family plan. So we threw an extra $30,000 into that. We also took the pool expenses that we know we would have under a normal year. A lot of the lines, we'll see that. It'll be towards the end of our discussion tonight. But those pool expenses that we usually have year over year, we zeroed out those budget lines. But for me, if we zero out those lines, then we're not raising property taxes to cover for that service. So next year, if we zeroed out those lines, we'd have to raise taxes again. So you have the taxes coming down for not charging or not asking for those funds. And then next year raising it. So instead, what we decided to do was to take that cost, and it's around $50,000, and just put it in contingency. So it's already baked in. You don't have to raise taxes to cover the pool next year. And so it's already in, but it's contingency instead of in the pool lines. And so if something unexpected were to come up, you would have that. And then we just, the contingency is one of those lines is when you can't balance for a couple of $1,000s, either you add to the contingency or pull from it just so that you can balance the numbers. And so that's why that number is a little odd. So if you want to call it, it's basically about $170,000 there. Hopefully that's helpful, maybe more confusing than it needed to be.
So in that case, like just for example, so if we have 50,000 that we're not spending, if we don't lifeguard, et cetera, and all things like that, would that be something if it wasn't needed elsewhere that we could use to offset costs of the splash pad? Would that be something that we could look at?
It's certainly possible. I think that the challenge there is that when the contingency account is basically for unexpected operational costs. If we feel confident that we're not going to utilize or need that $50,000, that would be, I think, a fine suggestion for council to consider. I think the problem though is when we go and write the check, it's going to be March, and crystal balls and all that don't necessarily work. But certainly it's always in council's purview to take that $50,000 and do what they feel is best. So if you feel that's the way to do it and there's 4 or more votes to it, then that's what happens.
I just looked at it.
Good plan.
Yeah, you can never have too much contingency as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and again, but that could be a decision we make later in 2026, right? If we write a check and code it one place and then we discover November, we have this 50,000 payable, we'll just do a journal entry to move it, right? Yeah.
But if there's a will, there's a way. And Angela,
That's what I was more or less
Yeah.
thinking. I was thinking back of our mind, money doesn't get spent that we have something to offset that expense.
Yes, there's some.
Shane? Enough out of you, sir.
So push it.
Any other questions on contingency? All right, so let's get into the police department, 3120, and the police chief is here. I will point out on the salaries line, 11 or 0, there is just under $10,000 appropriated above and beyond salaries for that detective sergeant. I get that right? Investigation sergeant? Yes. Yep. So that is an upgrade of a position. That's an internal promotion without adding staff. And if you need any details, obviously the chief is here to provide those details for you on that.
How many detectives?
Once that is done, our back office is what we call it, would be detective sergeant and 2 detectives. But the detective sergeant would be like a working foreman, like, essentially, kind of like our shift sergeants are. He would still take on cases, but also has some administrative duties. Right now, our detectives don't have a first line supervisor, and as with any job, you got to have that day-to-day boss, and that's what we're lacking.
So are you handling that yourself right now?
Our lieutenant is, so our lieutenant is who's ultimately in charge of the road patrol. He also has to also take the time to be a detective, because starting Monday, I'll have 2 detectives, but for the last year, he's also been a detective, been the supervisor for the investigations unit, and in charge of the entire road patrol. So he's had a lot on his plate.
Is he retiring this year?
We got him till at least sometime in 2027. So,
Good.
and this will also help him with our transition plan, because he's eligible for retirement. I'll be eligible for retirement. Sergeant Price will be eligible for retirement. So a lot of our top staff in the next couple of years, we got to train some people up. So this is a key position to help with that, as well with starting Monday. It's an internal move again, which saves on some of the overtime with the airport. You see that there's cuts to the airport overtime budget. I have Sergeant Murray, who's coming to start working Monday through Friday in an administrative role as an administrative type sergeant, but he's still going to count for airport overtime if my shift gets low. He'll go out to the airport. If my shift gets below minimum staffing, he'll just go back to the road patrol. So he's not just going to be stuck on that desk doing desk work. So it's going to be versatile there.
Good.
I do have a question about the internal moves. So
Sure.
how is that going to affect our road patrol and other areas?
Sure. So ultimately what the staffing will be is every shift has a sergeant. So there'll be 4 road sergeants and 2 patrolmen. So 3 officers on a shift. And then during the day, we still supply dispatch services. Our title for that is assistant to the chief of police. I am down one of those. It is in the budget. We'll be hiring one January. And then at night, first the county dispatches for us. So still all the shifts will be evenly staffed, 3 officers. There'll be 3 again in investigations, and then administrative wise, I guess you want to say the administrative team is also 3, myself, lieutenant, and then administrative sergeant. And then of course we have 1 assistant to the chief, who is our records keeper, does all our incident-based reporting for the FBI and whatnot. So that's how the department will be set up, and then of course the 3 school resource officers.
I guess maybe I could make it a little more clear what my mind is trying to grasp and put together. So right now, this year with road patrol, how will it be next year? Will it be the same number?
It will be the same, and we're down 2 officers due to injuries. And in a perfect world, if they came back, I would also have a swing shift. So that would put 3.5 officers on each shift. I say half because they would split shifts. They'd be half. The shift would be on the day and half the shift would be at night.
So I was just gonna say, so we're not sacrificing here.
No.
To increase here. Okay,
No, I'm not
that's my
shorting
concern.
anything. It's been kind of the plan all along, to fashion it in this way. And we're finally getting the bodies to put the plan in play.
Thank you.
The two, we don't anticipate fire in January.
Yeah,
Is it?
the two,
I'm sorry. The position in January?
this is, the position in January is essentially a dispatch type position. The
Assistant to the chief.
Yeah, assistant to the chief of police is how we have it titled. She left us in September, I want to say. Now it's been a while. No, it was actually August because she took a job in the school district. So we've been out with that position, and it's actually, we chose not to fill it to save some funds for the rest of 2025, and that was done intentionally. We'll fill it in January. And those two officers who are out injured, council, you know who the two are. So they're not coming back to work.
Chief, I'm gonna ask the same question I ask every year. Do people have all the necessary personal protective equipment to do the jobs?
Yes, they do. Everyone's got vests within the last 5 years. Half my staff is brand new, as you know, so they got brand new vests. We just applied again for the recipient of the vest program. So fingers crossed that we will receive that grant to replace the oldest of the vests that we have. So, but thank you for asking that.
Okay, moving forward, the next line I'd like to point out is line 120 overtime. In the budget this year is $220,000. The chief's ask this year was $210,000 if memory serves me. I put $160,000 in the budget. This is a budget decision that I'm recommending within the budget here, the recommended budget. The chief would like to, in a perfect world, have enhanced services. And if you want the definition of enhanced, I'm sure the chief would be happy to explain to you what those are, those enhanced services. Based on our budget constraints, based on us investing in a fully staffed or as close to fully staffed as the department's been in several years, I just didn't think, given the other priorities within the budget, that we could afford those enhanced services. So I did bring the overtime line down. If there are questions, this might be the right time to ask them.
What are the enhanced services?
So I guess I can tell you what you will get and what you won't get is I guess the best way with this budget. You'll get operations, we can fill our overtime from sick time, personal leave. That's all that creates overtime at our police department. Our vacation time does not create overtime, just the way our agreements are with the unions. It's going to cover some of our operational overtime, such as search warrants or guys that are held over, court cases, court overtime, training overtime, things of that nature. But what you're not going to get is when things get busy in the summer, and say it's the parks or certain neighborhoods, and hey, should we put on an extra patrol tonight? The answer is going to be no. That can't happen. When you have community events where we would normally put on an extra officer, the answer has to be no. Any community policing where we would get out there with the public, just interact, touch of trucks and things like that, the answer has to be no. And that's just everyone has to support that on this council, along with the city manager. It can't be the police department that has to be the face of telling the public no. It's got to be all this in on that to swallow the economic times that we're in and to make this decision. So there won't be bike patrols. There won't be impact teams. That's the reality of things. So we'll make do on operations, but you're gonna get the bare bones.
And the reason why I made the decision that I did, and it's really not a decision, it's a recommendation to council, is that it's really a trade-off between having a fully staffed department and just not being able to do a lot of the extra things that I think everyone in this room would, in a perfect world, love to do. Their decisions and benchmarks and lines that can or can't be crossed, and I just wasn't able to balance the budget without making, this cut and some other ones as well. Ultimately, it's council's decision, and you can certainly restore those funds. That means either you need to find offsets in other cuts or to increase the levy. That's the decision point that you face here.
So when a special event is asked for and we feel that it's not safe for the public unless we have an extra person, then are we going to deny that special event permit, or how are we going to handle that? Well, some of it's permit. Some of it, if there's a race, they have to ask for permission to close a road, things like that. If we want to use the city property down near the fort, there's a permitting process for that.
Well, and that's some of the things I think of, like the duathlon series and things of that nature, where even though it's a short time period that we're there, but it takes 3 or 4 officers to block off all the roads all on overtime. These entities might have to get creative and get more volunteers, or think of the volunteer fire departments and see if they'll come in, it's in the city. It's just not going to be there. It just kind of is what it is. It's part of this is just to say, of course, we always have to, it's risk management. If there's going to be a large crowd, we got to be there. Just that's police work and safety and security. If we have a large crowd, we're going to be there. But it's these smaller events where we would normally just have had a police officer at, or I would have denied time off, where I said, hey, no officer can be off. We'll be able to do that to the guys. That makes sense to everyone.
It does. I was just looking for clarification so that when we are approached, we have the same answer together.
Yeah, I mean,
That's what you're asking for, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I'm willing to work with the organizers to these events and help them think outside the box and what resources are out there and what can we do and what can't we do. And
I think we should pass a vigilante law to make up.
we had that going a couple years ago.
You'll be the first. What's that?
We had a vigilante crew a couple years ago. It
I
didn't
know,
work
I
out too well. No.
I got my four-wheeler back yesterday from the shop. It's after they pretty much took a number on it.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Anything else for Chief Kearns?
I've got a couple more lines that I
Okay,
want.
sorry.
Yeah, no, just to point out as potential discussion points, or at least to point out to council. Overtime Airpoint line 121 is down. I think we've talked about that, but there's the appropriation line deduction or reduction based on the revenues. Line 140 time and accruals, I did bring that down by $30,000. There is at least one member of that department who is eligible for retirement, but to be able to make things balance, I did reduce that number. And so if the retirement does happen, we'll need to fund that through contingency, but it's a calculated risk on that part. Special equipment is 240. The significant reduction there is based on the chief's recommendation. Heat and light is 460. That's up about $5,000 based on the trend, and a 2% increase in our rate. 480, line 480 is gasoline, down $7,000 based on trend and usage for this year and last year. Training is up $5,000. I think it's based on the chief's recommendation, and more people probably means a few more dollars in training. Uniforms down significantly because the new officers have uniforms. So those are my significant changes within the recommended budget that I wanted to point out. But certainly if you have other budget lines or even these budget lines that you want to continue having discussions on, the chief is here to answer your questions.
So when we look at specialized equipment, it's down 21,000. And thinking about the same situation with the pool, are we gonna have to need, is there gonna be a need for specialized equipment? Have a significant increase like next year?
So specialized equipment, if we remember, I didn't start 2025 with a number of 21,000. Every time I come to you and spend asset forfeiture money, we move money to specialized equipment. That number, if I remember right, probably started at like $7,000 for 2025. So it's probably right on par.
Okay.
Maybe a little less. That well of asset forfeiture money is getting pretty dry. So just so everyone's aware of that, we've spent on need items, as you're aware. It's been equipment that's worn out, need be. Obviously, we bought our new canine with it, but that well is getting dry. I'm hoping with our investigations unit being back up and running, that means we're going to be much more proactive in the narcotics game, and we can start seizing assets from these types of folks. So
when you seize, pull a car over,
yes,
full of drugs, that car becomes ours.
it has to go through judicial proceedings, and sometimes it takes years. I have funds seized from 2018 through the federal government. I have no clue where the process is.
Just sitting there,
Randomly, Angela's office will get a check from the Department of Treasury, and she's like, hey, where'd this come from? And I gotta open up my folder. They're called DAG forms, and I'm like, that was from this case.
That's from that case.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a
But
way.
it takes a long time.
Once their case is adjudicated and what the judge orders.
Okay.
Right, anything else, council?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, chief.
Very much.
Next department is 3140 fire. We also have fire chief here. I point out changes to 3 lines, but certainly ask away on the questions. The first line, reduction, it's line 120 overtime, reduction from $200,000 to $150,000, so a $50,000 reduction. Same premise and same concern of mine as in the police department and their overtime reduction. Again, we're fully staffed, and any of the extra enhanced services that I certainly wish we could afford to have. I just don't think in this current budget environment we're able to do that. So hence the reduction. I'll just go over the last 2 real quick, and then we can open up for questions. Line 140 is vacation coverage. The decline there is basically we've replaced more expensive officers with less seasoned and less expensive officers, so that rate of pay on the average goes down. So there is a good sized reduction the reduction will get smaller every single year as these folks make more money, and the average cost for overtime goes up. And then specialized equipment is department head actually asked for $30,000. I cut that number in half. And that's based on overall budget constraints as well. So those are my significant identified budget lines. And so I'm happy to have any of those questions and other lines reviewed by council.
Same question, chief. You're gonna have all the personal protective equipment they need to do jobs.
Yes, similar to the police chief, over half of my guys have less than 2 years on the job, so all their gear is new. Thanks to council approval of a new engine arriving summer of 2026. And actually with the past administration, they took away bodies. They were pretty good about buying us equipment, so we're in a pretty good spot that way.
What was the specialized equipment that you were hoping for?
So we don't actually have an earmark for anything in particular. So if a hose gets a hole in it, a nozzle breaks, any of our equipment that we use, we do have some duplication of stuff. We usually leave it on a reserve engine. So it'll be tight depending on what happens. If nothing breaks, obviously, it's not an issue. It was higher last year. It was 50,000, I believe, last year. That was because we had to outfit. Ended up being 5 new hires with turnout gear, and that's around $7,500 a piece. So we're not in that situation. We're fully staffed for the first time in 5 years. I think with the overtime reduction that I didn't necessarily agree with, I think we should be able to come into that range. It's hard to tell because we haven't had a full staff, and I don't know what the trends are as far as their use of time that they accrue. So stay tuned.
I just remembered back when I was on council last time, we had an issue where we was all air tanks were starting to expire at the same time.
So
I wanted to make sure it wasn't.
So our air packs are, they're about 5 years out. But they're not far enough out to where they would be viable for a grant. They are showing their age, and the maintenance of them is getting a little more expensive every year. So it's something we'll have to look probably in the next 2 or 3 years, and whether we replace them all at once, which I don't recommend. That's what happened last time. Then they're all due at once, or we start replacing a few here and a few there.
I know the turnout gears are very expensive, so some of your senior officers, they turnout gears in decent shape.
So by OSHA regulation, it's supposed to be replaced every 10 years. Keep a spreadsheet of that. Everybody's has been getting it when they were supposed to. So with the exception of me, but I really shouldn't be on buildings anymore. I think, so.
And I know each year is unique, but looking at the expense for overtime through August of this year, we're certainly trending below budget.
That's a myth. One thing that you don't see in that in those sheets, and Angela could actually speak to that as well, is my personnel are allowed to put time on the books. So when they work overtime, they get time and a half money, or they get time and a half that they can accrue. At the end of the year, they get paid down to 200 hours. They can carry over 200 into the following calendar year. That will be paid out in December. I anticipate that to be well over $100,000. One individual, I think, has 1,300 hours, so he'll be getting paid for 1,100. So, so yes, it looks like there's a savings, but I don't anticipate it to be quite that large. Yep.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Is there any timeline on that time then to consider if they don't, obviously they're not going to use it, catch it, but
Nope.
it's a wide open time of rule.
200 every year you can carry over. So
Balances out at 200 and cashes in.
starts off at 200 at the end of the year. And
Exactly.
yes.
Other questions for the fire chief? All right, next department is 3410 Animal Control. I have no notes, and for the most part, all of the budget items are relatively the same between 2025 and the recommended 26. Next. Next department is 3620 Code Enforcement. Just a few lines to talk about here. The time accruals pay, there's nothing budgeted in 2025, $5,000 budgeted in 2026 for a potential anticipated retirement. Capital equipment from $3,000 to $0 because we don't have any capital equipment needs in 2026, so no reason to appropriate funds there. Office expenses, that's line 420, down by $8,000. I reduced that based on our overall budget constraints. We're going to have to work within that number. And lines 515 and 518, the way the accounting department, the controller's office codes things, it's better just to swap the numbers there. We've appropriated in, I would say, the wrong line, and so we just swapped the two numbers. . Any questions on code enforcement?
The office expense, like what are we anticipating, an 8,000 reduction in that? What kind of things are they looking at that caught with that?
Moments.
We all know we've been asking code enforcement to do more, and I just want to make sure we're not tying our hands on it.
So a lot of what is in that line is actually, if I'm not mistaken, the software, that iWork software that they use. And I think we budgeted maybe high for that. And what I remember is that I think it comes in at 10 grand.
We actually just paid it. It was probably on the agenda on the other last night.
Was it 10 or 12?
$10,000.
Okay. So we do leave a few pennies for some random expenses, but 20 seemed to be a little high based on that. Yep. Other questions? Okay.
All set? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Time to spend some quality time with Shane. The first DPW department is 5110 street maintenance. I did not have any significant changes to the budget. So unless there's any questions on that, I'll give you a second to look over those budget lines.
Any questions?
Is there a reason your 100% is now going to the general fund instead of splitting it?
We'll get to that department. Just 1 second.
Same question.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll move on. We'll do street cleaning, then we'll get to the garage. So 5115 is street cleaning. I just wanted to point out a $26, almost $27,000 increase to the salary line there. That's we did add a DPW employee split between all three funds. This is where we put that additional 1/3 of an FTE in this line there. So that's why that number went up by $27,000. And now we'll get to 5132 Public Works Garage. And Angela might be able to better explain, although Shane's here too. We did allocate 100% of the mechanics to the general fund this year.
I think it gets rotated back into the water and sewer.
It does, yes. So on the general fund revenue, you can see that the money coming in is now a $911,000 budget on internet revenue. Some of that increase, Fonda addressed earlier today, but some of that increase is also because we are billing back to the water and sewer a portion of the garage, whereas in prior 2 years, we had done a direct allocation of those employees, a third of the expense of each of those funds, and reduced the interfund transfer in those years. So we're kind of going back to an accounting method that happened in 2023. I think it would be lasted at 100%. And the reason for that change is more just to streamline some processes internally. So it's not that the money is changing, the money's not really increasing in the garage the way it looks. It's more being able to streamline some of time reporting to accounting to payroll to ensure that we're capturing everything appropriately. In discussions with Shane, we kind of felt this might be a little bit easier this way. Going back.
If I agree, I think that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. The only, I guess, my only thought process with that is if someone is reviewing the budget and all of a sudden they see that gosh, my water rates went up, my sewer rates went up, and these costs went down, are they going to understand that transfer? And I guess a lot of people aren't going to go that much into the budget, but if somebody does, is that apparent?
I think so. I just flipped ahead to tab 5 and just pulling water fund as an example. We have an increase of cost every single year due to the increase of materials. So when we look at the overall budget year over year, we're at 2.4 million in 2024 for budget. Then we jump up a little bit to 2.5. We're at 2.7, and we have some projects going on in the water fund. So I think if someone were to look line by line at personnel, that they might wonder. But if you take the budget as a whole, it's certainly within a tolerable increase.
I mean, we all want to make it easier, right? We all know every department is doing more
For sure.
with less, so anytime we can help that is important, but I just wanted to make sure those optics were still going to be.
I think you're welcome.
In the Public Works garage, I have two other lines that I identify as significant changes. The first is heat, light, and power 460, an $11,000 increase. Overall, our electrical costs, when you add up the total appropriations, we were certainly within budget. The problem is we may not have allocated them perfectly throughout the different departments and without the different funds. This is one of those lines where we probably didn't allocate as well as we should have, but there are a number of heat, light, and power lines that were reduced to more than make up for it. So I guess taking money from one line and putting it into the other is basically what I would say to that. Then the last line in this department is gasoline, taking it down $20,000 based on usage and history and current pricing. So any questions on that? Okay, hearing none. 5142 is snow removal. The only line significantly changed here is materials and supplies, down $15,000. And what I would say to that is Shane has a number of encumbrances, well, one from 2024, and we're planning on encumbering 2025 funds from these budget lines to make sure that he has enough. But we can certainly generate some savings in the appropriation for next year based on some of the underspent in last year that we encumbered and this year that we will encumber. Okay, next department is street lighting, 5182. Here's another heat, light, and power example. Down $115,000. Again, there are some lines that are higher. This one obviously is significantly lower. A lot of this probably has to do with the way it gets coded in our controller's office as much as anything. And we'll continue to work to make sure that we're putting the expenses where they need to go. It is a big number, but I think you'll see in either the water or the sewer fund, I don't recall which, you'll see a relatively large increase. Okay, with no question, any other questions there?
So I guess we'll talk about when we get to that other area where it is. I just wondered why there versus here, street lighting.
I think we've had a hard time trying to put our finger on street lighting because with the LED conversion, we thought there would be less expenses and there were more. So we've adjusted the budget in that direction last year. And now all of a sudden we're seeing a savings and we're adjusting the other direction. So we probably need to have a better handle on this and we will as time goes on.
Prior to your
I think sewer plant's relatively new to it, a lot more, a lot more, ultraviolet lighting that runs all year round, that stays a certain temperature in the winter. We're probably using more there. I think that might be the one.
Okay. And if we are allocating towards those operational funds, that takes some pressure off the general fund and therefore the levy. And we all know that only about 50% of properties contribute to the levy. So it's not necessarily the worst thing from an standpoint if that is the way it shifts. All right.
Yeah, I always like to put more water and sewer funds because of that situation when we can, if it's legal. That's why I was challenging mechanics 100%.
Well, they're still being allocated. So we talked about that revenue line where there's the interfund transfers into the general fund and it's much higher. It's about $100,000 higher. That's where it comes in.
Gotcha.
But what they don't have to do is when they do the payroll every 2 weeks, make sure that mechanic gets coded 1/3 to this department and 1/3 to that department. It's just one button or one journal entry at the end of the year that moves funds from here to here. So it's an administrative savings.
Gotcha.
In the end, it's a zero, it's a net zero. Okay.
Same end.
Yes. Yeah. So sidewalks is 5410. three lines to identify 330 is capital construction. And 490 in that same department, there's $10,000 net difference and we swapped the two. Capital construction and materials, those are two different things. And so basically what we've done is just basically swap those two. I think in the budgets in the past, we've had those numbers incorrect. So this was a correction. Yeah. And then the other thing to point out is 370, that's vehicle leases. We are going to eliminate the leases of these vehicles and we'll buy those leases out and then we don't have to continue to pay interest on that.
Lana, which vehicles?
Oh, there's probably 15 of them. I certainly can brief council if they're interested in that. I didn't. One or two.
Basically like pickup trucks, things like that.
For my department, yeah, the pickup trucks and, yeah, a box van with our sidewalk crews and then our 5 with the two.
I think that's right, yeah.
I'm a little leery there because before the leasing program, we had some people, particularly in parks, driving pickup trucks that shouldn't have been on the road for 5 years. They're death traps. And the leasing program brought the vehicle programs up to everybody's got a safe vehicle. I don't want to see us go back to that. Are we going to be able to afford purchasing new vehicles in 4 or 5 years? Where are we going to go?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. I am familiar with the enterprise lease program. I am not a big fan of it for DPW and code enforcement and assessment. I am a fan for it when we beat up the vehicles like in the police department. What you end up doing is you pay significantly with interest and with the fees that they collect on it. And the incentive is to sell the vehicle and roll those dollars into the next lease where you continue to pay interest and lease. So this is a long way of me saying that I don't believe the city can afford to do that anymore. However, I do understand your point, and part of the capital improvement plan will be a vehicle replacement plan to go along with it, where we will talk about every vehicle, we will calculate its useful life, and we will plan on replacing those. And ultimately, sorry.
Then to go along with your suggestion, I understand the rationale. I just was concerned that we not go back to where we were 20 years ago, or 10 years ago.
We have a big upfit cost. Every truck we get to flat, that's an extra price. Our plow trucks are prices. So we're losing. I think we start buying with a set of plan. Those ones we lease will ship down, let's say our college kids, stuff like that, so they will be driving. Junk, but that's good. How it is.
We had the same thing with an ambulance, and we're not doing it anymore. So
Yeah.
that didn't make economic sense. Finally looked at it.
I vaguely recall that there was recommendation from the financial restructuring board with doing some of those leases, and there might have been some incentives. Just vaguely remember that, because we went to a lot of these vehicles that we hadn't done in the past, and that happened in 2018, maybe 19. So, okay.
Yeah, so if you don't have any money and you need to replace a bunch of vehicles, I think the enterprise program is great. There is there's no free lunch here. So, the win is you get an upgraded fleet. The loss over time is you pay the interest and the fees. And I believe we've received all the incentives from the financial restructuring board. So we're good there. And, with good planning, good capital planning, good management, which I believe is in place. And no knock to the past, but these are things that are top of mind for certainly me. If we have a good capital replacement plan or a vehicle replacement plan within the CIP, and council is supportive of it, we know that, okay, this year we need a pickup truck, and you put it into your budget, you bake it in, and then those funds are already appropriated, and maybe it's a pickup truck this year, and maybe it's 2 cars next year, but that money is basically already in there. And then 10 years down the road, you haven't paid the fees, you haven't paid the interest.
The trick is keeping your governing board committed to the plan. Governing boards turnover.
Well, and it served the purpose when we did it in 2019.
I agree.
Purpose, because trucks and vehicles are basically falling apart. So, served the purpose.
Yeah.
Now it's time to dug us out of the hole, now it's time to move on to a better plan.
Shane, I want to ask you the same question as the chiefs. I've got all the personal protective equipment they need. Anything you need to improve for safety?
No, I think they're good. Actually, we did that, like the water project, we got a $12,000 box used, but.
Other questions?
Well, I guess I'll throw it out there, because you still hear it from citizens, and in this budget environment, I know it's not a possibility, but there's no plan right now to bring back the sidewalk replacement program. I do still hear that quite frequently.
I say it every time.
I know.
Funny you should mention that. Angela and I are working on a plan and we'll coordinate with Shane. We're hoping to have some sidewalk funds left over from this year's budget. And we may come to you towards the end of the year to set up a sidewalk reserve. That is not 100%. We're still trying to, we need to make sure that, you know, our numbers are hitting where we think we're going to hit. But if we're close to that, that program is not lost on me. And as I walk the city streets, I realize that our sidewalks are a big problem. And Shane is really good about poking me and reminding me of that. So we're going to try very hard to do that. And if by chance we can't do it this year, we'll certainly try to do something in next year.
There's hope. Thank you.
There is hope.
So currently, is it still the citizen pays half, we pay half, or is that not the case anymore?
No, not the case.
That was a program, not funded.
That's gone anymore. Okay.
But we're going to try and fund it through a reserve.
Okay.
And that always had a cap. You only have so much in there.
I think we're 3:30. We do have a budget of $5,000 to reimburse sidewalk.
Okay. That's, no, that 5,000 is for, if we force something.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, if we force it.
Okay.
We'll do that.
That might just want to-
It's really like a complaint basis, someone would have to make a complaint on it.
So currently, if I want to put I don't have sidewalks in our neighborhood, but if I had a sidewalk and I wanted it replaced, I pay the full price in front of my house. Okay. But before it used to be half.
Yeah, some years they funded it, some years they didn't.
Okay.
40%. Yeah, it's 50% for, if you have just a sidewalk on one side, if you live in a corner, one side 75%, the other side's 50%.
Okay.
Don't get me started on my cat, I decided.
I don't want one either. I'm very happy with no sidewalk.
But yeah, there was always a waiting list for that, and it was a certain amount, so we only funded that 50% up
Right.
to X dollars.
Right.
Then you had to wait till next year or cover it. It wasn't just everybody that wanted.
Gotcha. Yep.
Correct, Shane?
Yeah, it's a good program. It usually gets pretty much eaten up fairly quick.
It's a
Someone in Scranton, she called me every year.
It's a great program. I've never lived in a community where the community, where the government actually will fund sidewalks. I've always had to pay it out of my pocket, so.
Everybody that doesn't have a sidewalk should have to pay a fee to help us that do have to maintain our own. I got lucky. I mean, my whole sidewalk, I did the work myself, so the city's 50% really paid for my everything other than my labor. I'd like to note that that was 20 years ago. There's not a single crack, as I point out to Shane. Often.
Good work. So we're hiring to have sidewalks now, right?
Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt your shoulder.
Good job, man.
Might get turned out like that.
All right, any other questions on the sidewalk department? Okay, next department to look at is 6410 Economic Development. The reason why I point this out is that we haven't had in the past any of these appropriation lines funded. So basically, we've taken money that used to be in the planning department and shifted that over into this department to fund the economic developer's salary, professional development, and some of the other ancillary costs that go along with having somebody in here. And the offset comes from the planning department, which is Department 8020. Okay, next department is 7D20, Parks and Rec Admin. Just something to point out, capital construction is 3030. So those capital costs are not generally recurring, but you see that it's the same number this year and next year. So this year was to replace the boiler at Dubisky, and next year is to replace the in-floor heating.
Yeah, there's 3 boilers there. One ran, 2 ran the inflow heating, and they had a ground plane. They offset it with like a third, the boiler ran through. Well, all 3 were pumped out. So Monday, Kirkland would be there, we would put Seabird to put them back in, but the inflow heat's been messed up from day 1. So we figured we'd get the one fixed, up and running, and out of that money this year, we also put some hot water system in there because that was running off the boilers, we didn't have hot water. It's now demanded, and then next year the plan is to get the inflow heat figured out by the issue since day 1. That's why we put the air handling shortly after the bill.
So I just wanted to point that out as to why the number is consistent, because usually you do a capital project and that's it, that expense should be gone. So that's why that's there. The other line here to look at, in my opinion, is 498, other contractual expenses. 2025 is a 0 in that line. This year, for 2026, we put $3,000 in there. There are a number of contracts that could be coded to this line. So obviously those costs have shifted from another line or several lines to go into this line. So that's why it was a 0 and now there's numbers in it. Parks is 7110. The salary line is up $19,000. I just want to point out that's based off of a calculation of summer help and Dubisky workers, just so that when you see a rather large increase in salaries, that's part of the reason why, along with contractual obligations. Materials and supplies is down $18,000. We calculate the current service number is $14,000 for that line, and I cut $2,000 from the current service line for all the reasons I keep talking about. Questions on the Parks Department? Okay, 7140 is rec activities. One budget line to talk about there, 498 other contractual. This year's budget is a 0. Next year's recommended is 4,500. We're shifting funds from other lines to put into this line, so it's a bit more transparent because we'll be paying for concerts in the park costs out of this line. So we can just look at this line, know what it is, and you can see the cost for that particular program there. We got 2 grants, not fully funded. One was closer than the other. One was half, and the other was just off.
So, yeah, so this one, I think it looks good. We just got to get contracts with bands, turn it in with it. That's what we worked on. Now, the other one was the arts program. They found 5,000 of the money for the AEDs.
Yeah.
Pretty close. We got the $800 really like 2 AEDs.
So surprised we got some grants from the county. The Youth Bureau had a couple of grants. I just saw it today. He knew yesterday. About $8,000 in total. So that's going to go into our parks program.
So the concerts in the parks, are these other than the ones for the Seaway Festival, other than like the ones during the other festivals, these are additional to?
Yep, they were, our plan is to try to do one every other week. Start from the end of May through Fall Fest. I don't know how it's in July, which is Seaway Festival and stuff like that, so we try to coordinate with that.
Okay. Next department is pool 7180. As I mentioned before, we basically zeroed out almost every pool line and appropriation line. We totaled that up and put it into the contingency account for the reasons that we talked about. What we did do, however, we left $10,000 in salaries in because if the splash pad is open, we should have some type of supervision there. We figured 10,000 is about right for covering that. Next department is the arena, 7181. Heat, light, and power, 460. We've talked about that ad nauseum. This one probably needs to go up a little bit, about $9,000 here in the recommended budget. Other contractual, which is 498 expenses. We have 0 in this budget. This is a newly created line. We put $14,500 for multiple maintenance contracts that are scattered throughout that budget or other budget lines. So we wanted to centralize all of them in one budget line so that easily reviewed and easily monitored. All right, if there are no questions, I'll go to both the historian department, 7510, and the celebrations department, 7550. No notes, no significant changes to any of the appropriations from one year to the next. Which takes us to the planning department, 8020. Oh, sure,
So sorry.
of course.
Celebrations, that's, we added there. What are those?
So celebrations is $7,000. We had that same appropriation in 2025. And what we are trying to do is to categorize the in-house expenses that we have for our different events, Seaway Festival and the lot, where there's overtime and some other expenses, where we want to codify that number and have a place in the budget where we show that for no other reason than to be able to say to the community, we may not write a check to the Seaway Festival, but we do provide a number of services, and here's how we can quantify that. I think that's a work in progress. We'll get better at it as time goes on. I hate to ask our team to do administrative stuff like that when they have so many operational things to do. But I usually do ask anyway, and we'll get to it. And I know it's not fun for them to do, but I think it's really important for the community to know that. So that's what that line is about. Okay, I may have jumped the gun. Any other questions on those two lines?
Father, you're talking about the celebrations.
Yes, sir.
Actually, if we actually do credit our overtime for things like the Seaway Festival into that would free up funds from the overtime department for the police and fire that we list as overtime, correct?
That is correct. It's only $7,000 though, all in. So, if that number gets bigger over time, then I think your thought process is really strong.
It realistically credits what it costs the city to have that put on. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think the goal is to be able to quantify that number and then record it in the budget. And hopefully it does free up some dollars in some other areas. Sure. So the next department is the planning department, 8020. And I go extensively into the details of that on page 8 of my budget message. So I didn't go through this line by line, but I'm more than happy to discuss any of those budget lines that anybody has a question on.
So I'm a strong supporter of having an actual person as a planner involved. I didn't get that yet. Page 8, question.
So I have had an incredibly difficult time finding a planner. I've interviewed a number of people. I actually stopped advertising because sometimes if you advertise too much, you're wasting your money. And I'm more than happy if we can find somebody who has some experience. What I can't have, in my opinion, and all due respect, is I'd love to have a planner. There's no question about it. But I can't hire a brand new planner that doesn't know doesn't have the experience, because I don't have the time to train them. We have a number of new staff people here as it is. Certainly I'm trying to spend time with the economic developer. I'm trying to spend time with the assessor in developing those folks. I don't believe that I have the time to be able to do that. And quite frankly, I would be doing all of that project management work anyway, while trying to develop a planner. And I'm not a planner at heart. So, I would have to do that oversight, continue to do the project management oversight, and we would have to pay another firm to come in and probably do the training up on that, because there just aren't seasoned planners out there. And I don't think we have the money to be able to do that. And so I will for another year, I'll take the hit, do the work on the project management side in the hopes that somebody comes to us at some point in time in the next 12 months or so. But I just do not have the time to be able to get another person up to speed, and we don't have the money to be able to do the planning right in a time where I still have to do the project management anyway while you're at home.
So I absolutely understand. I'm glad that we're on the same page. We want a planner. So we're going to continue to look.
We will.
Okay.
I think I probably won't look the rest of this year, and we'll probably start back up middle of January, end of January to put some ads in the paper and see, and continue to advertise with the New York State Planning Federations and see what's out there. My reservation is I can probably hire an entry-level planner, but that person, it's going to take them years to get up to speed.
Right.
And, I don't have the time to train them up. It will cost us money to train them up, and I'm still going to have to do all that work anyway. So I figured we're not in the best of financial positions. This is the most cost-effective way to move forward. And so in my recommendation to council is let's save the money this year, hope we find somebody towards the end of next year, and then retrigger the budget in that regard.
So I just want to share a couple thoughts. I do get complaints from residents often. And I think I've shared with you in an email, I'd like to, once in a while, see some people giving us a presentation that we can ask questions about and update things like that for grants. Or I think, when Andrea was here, it was a constant, she always spoke at our meetings with various questions, properties around the city, zoning, interacting with different boards. And I don't know if that's getting done to the level that she did it.
Well, of course it's not getting done to the level that she did it. Andrea was a rock star.
She
We
was
no
a rock
longer
star.
have a rock star. And what we have to do is try and,
Maybe I'm spoiled, I missed that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And-
I only worked with her for 6 months and I'm spoiled too.
Yeah.
And I wish she were here. And if she were to come in here tomorrow and say, I want my job back, I'm pretty sure we'd all get in line to sign up on that.
How
But
much
that's,
more you need? Yeah.
that's not the reality. So the reality is that we have to piece it together until we can find the next Andrea, or find the time and the funding to develop the next Andrea, right? And I just don't think this is the year to do it. I wish it were, but I just don't think it is. If residents have any questions, my name is on the planning website as the contact. I get calls all the time. If council has any questions, you should ask. I don't think anybody's shy in asking the questions. I'm more than happy to ask them or answer them or get you the answers. I think from the grant side of things, hiring the consultant was a great move for us. It's already paid for itself twice over this year, maybe close to 3 times this year. And I feel real good about what they're going to do to help us get a DRI and lots of other funding that goes along with it. We've got a number of grants in the hopper. I briefed council on them, both in public session, but also in my updates. So you're absolutely right. We are not delivering planning services as if Andrea were here, but we're certainly not dropping the ball per se on that.
We're not running that empty.
No, I don't think so. Like I said, we're not doing A+ work, which is what Andrea would have done. I'm the first person to admit it, but I still think we're doing B to B+ work. And although I want it to be better, we also have to pick and choose what we can do and what we can't do.
So maybe to satisfy at least myself, and maybe other members of council, a little bit more on the update side. Always scratching my head.
Sure, this may not be the right time to talk about it,
Right.
but maybe you and I can offline go and tell me
Okay.
kind of the things that you're looking
Sure.
to get as far as an update is concerned, and I can certainly try to provide that.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure, of course.
And just to remind you, we obtained the Andrea through an internship.
I know,
So, we developed her with the internship. It was really good for the city, really good that she was acclimated to the city and then was able to step into the position. So that's always awesome.
when it all went corrupt. And Andrea immediately stepped in and took over.
Yeah, let's see where planning consultant is now.
We have 2. We have Labella and we have MRB. So
And who's the other one?
MRB Group.
Okay.
So we generally use Labella for planning board specific items, zoning board specific items. They're very good at that. They've taught me a lot, and they do a really nice job of putting stuff together for those planning boards. I rely on MRB to make sure that our grant administration is up to speed. Obviously, we have the technical specialist and we have the grant writer, but this helps us full circle make sure that all the documents are where they needed to be. They've done the seekers that you've seen, and we had 2 seekers that were not done correctly. So they identified that, and although it cost us money, it would have cost us more if we didn't fix them. So those are some of the things that they've been able to provide. So I think there's value add there too. Not perfect, but a lot of value add. Good cost.
You mentioned the Federation of Planners. But with that in mind, would it behoove us, and I fully on board with the position as far as planning, right, consultants. But going forward, I don't know if there'd be an appetite for it. Like my thought process is to stay under the guidelines of civil service and maybe fund for a part-time retirement.
It's a good idea. I didn't really think about that.
But I don't know. The appetite, the salary warrant somebody to come here to the city of Ogdensburg. But just something.
No, it's a good thought. Absolutely. And because we do join, it's called the NFIP. We do join it because we utilize it for training for our planning board and zoning board people, because they do some things. I might hopefully carve out some time and maybe be a bit more active in that. And maybe I can develop a relationship with somebody, and who knows? That's how stuff gets done these days sometimes.
And to piggyback off of Mike, maybe a shared service.
It's been asked, and unfortunately there isn't an opportunity there.
Okay.
I've asked it in 2 different municipalities already, so I think it's a great idea. We just haven't had any luck. Wrong timing, I think is that.
Sure.
I think this deserves more discussion in the future.
Yeah.
Discussion process, but if we switched our search to a part-time instead of full-time, that might open up somebody that is retired and still wants to work in that. So there's other opportunities, but I think the course you're going right now is the best way to go.
So when I do start advertising again, we'll do something more wide range and seeking part-time or full-time planner, and make it a little bit wider to cast that net maybe a little bit better and see what we come up with. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good suggestion. I didn't think of a part-time. I guess I just have dreams of Andrea in my head, so, and the quality that she produced for us. One thing I will mention in this that I didn't put on here is one of my proposals. It is spelled out in the budget message, is to increase the, I'll call them stipends, but the official term is remunerations. Hopefully I got that one right. Increase the 2 stipends for the fire chief and for the DPW director for the work they're doing on code enforcement and on recreation. They have taken both of those departments bull by the horns. You see it with the revenue numbers that were in there. And in my opinion, when you have quality performance like that, and they're doing extra work, there's no question about that. Ken jokes around and says, I do more work in code enforcement than I do in fire these days. But when you have people that have stepped up and take that head on and are successful and produce, maybe it's the private sector guy in me, but I think you have to reward that. And I don't think these stipends are forever, of course. But I do think as long as these stipends are around that and the quality of the management coming out of that, one of my recommendations was to increase that by $2,500 for each one of them. I also get a remuneration, but I don't want any more money. I'll continue to do the work. But I want to make sure that at least I go on record of saying they should be rewarded for that. But that, of course, is up to council.
Any objections to that? No, I think it's something we all support.
Thank you. Any other questions I can answer for you in the planning 80/20 department? Okay, the rest here are pretty quick. I'll be more than happy. We'll just go through it through. The 8510 is the beautification committee or commission. Generally, we allocate $2,000, no change to that. Shade tree, which is 8560. The only line of consequence reduction is $1,000 in the tree removal line 472. That's just based on history. We don't tend to spend all of that money, or if you do, it's a really big number. So there was no sense in appropriating the full 5,000.
There is, I don't know if this comes under this line, but the number of ash trees, dead ash trees in the city, I don't know if they're on city property, but they're gonna have to come down because they're dangerous. The longer they sit, the longer those bugs. So I don't know if that's a good idea to reduce that. Because I don't know how many, and I don't know how many ash trees are on city property, but there's a,
Tree survey counselor that was done a couple of years ago that should identify that. Parks and Recreation has that tree survey.
they need to redo it because those trees are, I don't know what they're doing on their survey, but you just take a ride around the city and there are some dangerous situations. And again, there's hundreds of them. They're all dead and they're gonna fall and they're gonna cause problems. So
Let me connect with Shane on that. I'm not so sure the $1,000 makes a difference one way or the other, but I will talk to Shane. I'll send council whatever he comes up with, or whatever he shares with me, and if council feels that number needs to go up, we'll do
And I
that.
don't know if our guys can do that or they have to call in a,
I wonder if the state helped.
has to
Help
be
out
something.
municipalities, in this, because the MLS border situation.
It's gotta be
You
something.
ride down this road.
Well, they're awful.
I was under the impression that most of non-city property were taken down.
I don't know.
My impression. was-
They were working today.
A lot of paper streets that have them on
Yeah,
them.
they took one down on.
It might be under his-
So council, when I say survey, what it was it identifies where each tree is in the city, what type of tree it is.
Right.
So on this block, there's 3 maples, 2 ash, and that kind of thing. So that's what would be
So
helpful
there
to
should be a list,
see
right?
what that list is.
Right, but it,
How many are left?
I know there's some paper streets that have just rows of just, I'm just thinking of the one on the end of Champlain Street, or on Champlain and J Street, that's a paper street. And there's gotta be 25 or 30 of them in there that are just, it's a lot. And then,
It's not-
You can have them.
have them all, yeah.
Show us your insurance card.
Yeah, start cutting, yeah, get a feather in here. Okay, just,
Yep, no, it's a good point, and I will dig into that a little bit more for you.
Good.
Okay, just a couple more lines to point out. 9512 is the contribution to the library. That number doesn't stay the same, but our plan would be to cut a check to the library for $5,000 as opposed to decrease their debt service payment. There are no notes to talk about on the debt service line, 9,700. The cost is the cost, no negotiating with the banks there. And then we'll just talk about transfer to other funds. That's on the last page there, 9901. In particular, the first line, 905, which is transfers to the capital projects line. That's that $325,000 we talked about of fund balance. So we recognize it as revenue on the revenue side of things. This is the local share for the Green Resiliency Grant. And so this is the dollars going out. So it's really a pass through from the fund balance to the capital projects fund. But it's there in a transparent fashion so everybody knows what we did and we can't ever deny that we did it. It's right there. And then the other line to talk about is 906, funding from the general fund to our reserve accounts. And that is an increase, recommended increase from $25,000 to $50,000. And I think given our presentation on Tuesday, at least knowing that we need to put, according to the Development Authority, $620,000 a year away for future capital costs. Certainly this modest increase does not even fill the bucket, but it's an attempt to get closer to it. Again, all of these appropriation numbers are recommendations from the management team and myself to form the budget, and the final numbers are yours to determine. So that's the general fund. I don't know if we want to have conversations about that in general, or if we want to move on.
Any questions or comments about general fund at this point?
Good explanation.
All right, I did indicate that I wanted to circle back though, to talk about the property tax levy. You know, the proposed budget that Todd has presented to us continues on the path forward with regards to the reduced use of fund balance to balance our budget. The goal was to try to get that to zero by, I think, 2027. And at least to date, we're on the same path that was outlined to us or suggested to us a year ago. And for the reasons stated, while the city manager did suggest a 5-year goal, 5 consecutive years of a little over $100,000 reduction in the property tax levy, for the reasons he cited, he is recommended to us not making such a reduction this year and to keep the property tax levy basically as it is in 2025, take advantage of the increase in assessments to see a reduced tax rate. Unless council feels otherwise, I have asked Fonda to look at the budget in case city council wanted to try to continue with the goal of, in round numbers, $100,000 reduction in the tax levy in 2026 to try to stay in a path, 100,000 so a year for 5 consecutive years. If there's a way to do that by revising the budget in ways that don't affect operations, that don't affect services, that don't affect staffing, is it possible to achieve that? Also, for future discussions at next week's workshop, I've also suggested consideration of reducing the water fund rate increase by reducing the transfer to reserve from 100,000 to 50,000. And in effect, bringing the increase in the water rate down from 12% to 10%. When I ran my own numbers today, if we did elect to reduce the property tax levy by $100,000, it would bring the tax rate down to 13.90 from 14.50. Bring the constitutional tax limit down to about 80.5%, down from 82 where we are right now. And if you combine that with an anticipated slight reduction in the water rates, if we did reduce the transfer to the reserve by 50,000, I mean, we're talking somewhere between $5 and $10. So not a lot with regards to reduction, but the combination of those two could now make an assessed house of $65,000 the break-even point instead of the $80,000 where we are. Okay. So anyway, I wanted to bring that to council's attention. If the intention at this time is to stay the course as recommended, then we won't ask Fonda to investigate working with staff much time to explore alternatives. But if there is interest, then we could hear back from management to say, all right, if you want $100,000 reduction in tax, here's where we suggest we revise the budget. So I offer that for your consideration, and if you have any initial thoughts about that, I'd be welcome to hear it.
I'm not opposed to have Fonda look at it, but I don't see much in this proposed budget that can be cut further without affecting services. Already, cut just about everything as far as equipment and stuff goes that can be cut. The only things left to do without services would be like getting the reserves or contingency or something along those lines. Actual personnel budget, good, much we can do with that. Without losing people or services. Just my thought.
And it wouldn't be my intention to support a decrease if it meant loss of service, loss of staffing. But are there ways we could squeeze out another $100,000 to stay the course on the 5-year plan that was introduced last year?
I'd like to look at it and see what impact it would have. I do have some concerns going forward with any increase in the valuation of an increase in our tax base, property tax base, only because I'm hearing more people are going to be coming to ask for reductions next year. So this may have been this year's increase. Now people are getting more educated about how to do it, what to do with report assessment review. So I'm very nervous if we are looking at anything that counts on that tax base increasing or even staying the same. I think that's very, that's a jeopardy. So I'm a little concerned there if we face anything on that. But I would like to hear about it because if we can reduce that lottery, I think that would be a good thing. But I'd like to see that $100,000.
My calculations. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can put together the numbers I did on schedule. That's scheduled.
extent that we've calculated that it's a little bit, not see much. But that's
You know, I wouldn't mind that. I always like to be a little bit more on the safe side. Plan for more, spend less. And the years that I've been at council, that's sort of been the best approach. So I don't know how much we have. I would like to do that plan for spending more, but spend less. if we can. And when I'm looking at this budget, I see a lot of things that I see are like that, but it's tight. It's tight. I mean, $100,000 is nothing. But I'd like to know Fonda's opinion on that. I mean, you've been spending 3 months with these guys, right? Trying to get this budget down.
Sure. Mr. Tebow, did you want to comment before I move forward?
Trust, it's new, it's all new to me, so
No, I
I'm,
understand. The mayor and I did have a conversation on this earlier. What I would identify in this circumstance is, I would say to you, operationally, we're pretty tight. The wiggle room comes in, the amount of contingency, the wiggle room comes in is if you want to take some or all of that pool dollars that we moved from the pool department into contingency, that's $50,000 right there. And the wiggle room is how much you want to put into the reserve, right? Right now, we're putting $50,000 in. So you've got $80,000, $90,000 in contingency. You've got $50,000 in the contingency account for the pool. And you've got $50,000 in the reserve account that you could play with and reduce, right? So it's the trade-off. The trade-off is, lowering the levy, which is something that we all want to do whenever we can. But when you do that, you risk on one end the contingency in case something were to happen that you don't know is going to happen, and it's bigger than the number you have in there. Then you've got to dip into fund balance anyway to do that. And we do have to at some point in time say we are going to commit to our future capital costs. Maybe this is not the year to do that. That's a decision for council to make. So there's enough there to come up with $100,000, or the number was $117,000, whatever council wants to do there, to be able to build that in. The trade-off is less contingency. You're going to have to raise the levy next year to cover those pool operations, and you're not going to put as much into the reserve account, or none at all, depending on what your decision is. If those aren't palatable, we would start going into the operations, and the first thing I would do is recommend cuts to the enhancements, right? So we wouldn't have the data collectors, we wouldn't have the DPW person, we wouldn't have the new detective sergeant, and even those three things aren't going to be anywhere near enough. So 27,000, 37,000, that's about $45,000. And then I'd have to go in and start cutting current service operations for the other $55,000. So that's kind of an overview of where I would go in that. My recommendation, if council wants the $100,000, would be to take it out of contingency in the reserve somehow. And then you don't touch operations per se. If that's not acceptable, then we would get into it. It's your decision and your direction. I will give you the choices and the numbers, and then you can tell me what you want to do, and we'll reflect it in the budget.
And pending, certainly I'm looking for a decision tonight, but pending, our individual review of the notes we've taken tonight, the discussions that we've had tonight, and listening to the presentation. And I'll admit there may be areas of the budget where we think increase in appropriations might be needed. So, I look at that overtime budget in the fire department at $150,000 when we haven't had below $200,000 in three consecutive years at least. So we may need to move something, or ask management or move something from contingency into that to get that to a higher number, and that takes away less of an opportunity to explore a revision to the proposed property tax. So again, thought was on my mind. We've heard the city manager's reaction and his suggestions of where we might go. I'll send my numbers out to you and ask staff to just confirm that they're somewhat in the ballpark, I guess. But something for further consideration, either at the next meeting or once we adopt a preliminary budget. There's still a month of November to possibly make revisions before we accept the budget. I have every confidence that this council will accept the budget, and the preliminary budget we accept in 2 weeks. May not necessarily be the final product, but we will have a final product not defaulted. I think that's a fair statement.
I'm actually meeting on 22nd.
Is that the Wednesday?
Yeah, that's what water and sewer. Okay, any other thoughts or discussion on the general fund before we move on?
So on the docket today is to discuss the library, the Remington, and the insurance funds, those ancillary funds. I have no things to point out. Angela's here, and she's more of an expert on these lines than I am. I think it's status quo, and I included the insurance fund this year because we're going to be utilizing that self-funded MERP. So I at least wanted you to see the numbers that were in there. So I guess open forum on these questions and these budget lines.
Okay, so those would be the budgets that were in tab 7. We've all had the opportunity to review. Does anybody have any questions or comments on any of those?
Council, I'm out of here. It's rolling.
It's unrelated to the budget. but I think
I'll see this later.
Yeah.
It's unrelated to the budget, but I think the council should consider a resolution supporting the repeal of this electric thing that they passed with a budget with all new construction has to have electric, no natural gas heat, no fuel oil heat, stuff like that. I don't know the specific assembly and Senate bills, but
Gas?
yeah, with the last budget, as of January 1st, any new construction in New York State cannot have natural gas heat, cannot have fuel oil heat, it's all got to be electric. And that's a disaster in the country. I think we ought to look into sometime. Watertown just passed a resolution, supporting that repeal. But like I said, I don't know the numbers. It's something we should think about. I'll look that up. I'll send an email out to people, see what it is.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's the budget to get involved. It's already large talk about capital, backing off that, especially with the level of body. Wait a minute, and thought that's the smallest.
I'm here to do the same thing to our house.
The folks downstate have no idea what it's like to live in the real world.
But let me work with that, and we'll come up with.
I'll send an email out with just what I know.
Okay,
Maybe a link to the Watertown, the news article I read on it. The Watertown just passed it. I believe Assemblyman Gray put something out on his webpage about it too. So.
okay.
And just a note on the side, if you are trying to get your ticket for the Chamber Conference Center that follows our budget session next time, unless your email address is registered with them, there is a little glitch with that. So you just call the Chamber office or send them an email. I couldn't register because I had under control of and the others.
Okay, anything else you want to review this?
Not for me. No, thank you for your time and your good comments and questions. Good stuff.
Okay, so thank you, council. And again, for the public, our next budget workshop is next Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Thank you.